Hello, I'm Judd. I've been a pastor and counselor for over 40 years. I've preached about 4,000 sermons, and I've met with individuals, marriages, church leaders, all kinds of people for over 12,000 hours of face-to-face meetings. As a consultant and coach, I've worked with many different kinds of churches. I've seen them from what I call behind the curtain, from a perspective the public doesn't see. I've seen really healthy, thriving congregations, and I've seen profoundly unhealthy, struggling congregations. I've never seen a perfect one. I'm committed and excited about the church learning to use all the tools that are available to us in helping people experience the real freedom and lasting change that Christianity promises. Some of those tools have been discovered and developed in the mental health community based on psychology and other sciences. Let's stop pretending we have to have all the answers. Let's lead the way in building partnerships and learning communities that bring the mental health community and the church together. That's what we're going to be working toward on this podcast and YouTube. Welcome to the mental health and the mission of the church community.
Well, my name is Virgil Sierra. I'm the lead pastor of Vertical Church, aka Iglesia Vertical in South Florida. Took over for my parents who planted our church 32 years ago. In 2015, relaunched with my wife together, pastoring one church, two languages, English and Spanish, seeing a lot of growth, seeing a lot of fruit, and experiencing a great season of just leading the church and leading the family well. Also have the privilege of hosting the Avail podcast under Dr. Sam Chand and Martijn van Tilburg, who are co-founders of Avail Leadership, which is a Christian leadership brand that just pumps out all kinds of resources from the quarterly magazine on leadership to monthly books that are published, and the Avail podcast, which comes out every Tuesday. Have the privilege of interviewing amazing leaders, authors, pastors, guests, including Pastor
amazing
Judd,
leaders,
author of The Endurance Factor, and
Greg Surratt. Whoa, nice.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a privilege to pastor and be a part of what God's doing here in South Florida, and also have the privilege of taking a lot of this to Latin America. Pastor Robert Berger from Lima, Peru, Camino de Vida, is one of my overseers, and we do a lot of taking grow systems to Latin America and equipping pastors as well.
Yeah.
And even the need, seeing the need in Latin America for more resources on mental health and soul care is so big. It's a huge need. So I love being connected and having conversations like this.
Cool. Yeah, we'll have to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Josh has got a big heart for missions. But I was going to ask you something, Virgil. First of all, you know, when you said your name, Virgil, you stretched it to something.
Virgilio.
Right. Now, and you said that's Italian. Now, you're not Italian, are you?
No. The name is Italian, which could probably be pronounced Virgilio, but in Spanish, it's Virgilio, and it's my father's name. Our family's from Colombia, South America. My parents moved to South Florida right before I was born, and I was born here in South Florida, close to Miami.
Cool.
Yeah.
That is cool.
All right. I just wanted to clear that up because I was mildly confused. Well, Josh, tell us about yourself, man.
Yes, my name is Josh Roberts. I serve as the lead pastor at All People, a church just north of Boston. I'm married, celebrating 13 years this year, 25 years of being with my wife and knowing her. We have 3 kids, 10, 6, and 4. And 9 years ago, we moved to Boston to help serve at a church, which 3 years ago, we became the lead pastors of that church. And we also just reinvented ourselves, replanted the church 1 year ago in March. And we are a true international church. We have 56 nationalities that worship with us every weekend. We translate into Portuguese and Spanish at both of our services. Huge heart for the world. Steph and I met during mission school. We've traveled to over 20 nations together, and now the Lord's brought the nations to us. Still have a huge heart for church planting and networking with others. I also started with a friend, Josh Pennington. We started a little group called the Running Mates about 5 years ago. It's a small network of pastors that we gather monthly on a call. And then we take 2 trips a year together just for fellowship, renewal, friendship, camaraderie, and encouragement. And Chip's been a big part of helping me formulate that and strategize how do we really care for each other as friends, as pastors, as shepherds. And honored to be here with you guys.
Cool. Virgil, tell us about your family.
Well, my wife, Ghislaine, and I have been married now 21 years. It's a funny story because our mothers met when they were pregnant with us in South Florida.
Oh my gosh.
Both of our parents are from Colombia, South America, but they meet in South Florida. Her dad was looking for a carpenter to do some cabinet making jobs. He saw my dad's name, called him. Her dad is a musician. My dad is a musician. So they hit it off. The families met. There's pictures of her at my first birthday party. I say that she's been chasing me since the womb. She says that's not true. We disconnected for a span of about 10 years, and then when we were about 16, we reconnected. And it was 7 years before we got married, boyfriend, girlfriend, and so going 28 years, I guess, altogether. And we have 3 kids. Caleb is 17, driving. We're praying for him. Sophia is 15, about to drive, and Nico is 12. All 3 of them love church. They love Jesus. They love their parents, and we continue to raise them up and pray for each season of their lives. But they're wonderful students. They're doing great. They're honoring us. That's my immediate family. My parents planted our church, and they're still in the front row, all 5 services on Sunday, and running.
Wow.
Your parents are at all 5 services?
They are all 5. My dad tells me,
Dang.
"Hey, I didn't see so and so. I didn't see so." He's there doing his thing, and they're like spiritual grandparents.
That's cool, man.
Your dad's probably what I would call an old school pastor. Like when he notices they're not there.
Oh yeah.
I mean that's a lost art, or becoming a lost art.
Yeah, it is.
But a lot of churches get larger that you can't really do that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where the growth stuff comes in that you were talking about. Joey, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you do that off and on a little bit, but like as if you were talking to strangers, which you are.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in the church, and my parents were raised Catholic, and when they had a born again experience, we ended up in Pentecostal churches. So I grew up Pentecostal, and when I was in college, I felt called to ministry, but I remember asking God, "Hey, when is this?" Because I'm at a school that's not a seminary, and I felt such a peace. God saying, "Hey, I told you, but that's for later. So just do your thing." And so I became a teacher for 5 years. I was a school teacher.
Oh, wow.
Then ended up being my wife and I found Seacoast. Grew up in Charleston, so Seacoast started in '88, and we started going there and came on staff in '05 and been there for 20 years now. I love working with Chip because mental health is a very important topic for me. I have dealt with depression and anxiety for most of my life, and a lot of it was interwoven with some religious unhealthy teachings that I inherited that just was a recipe for disaster. So I had a mental health crisis in 2019 that Pastor Chip was very instrumental in helping me through all that time. So I was a campus pastor of one of the Seacoast campuses for 13 years. And now I help produce the Seacoast podcast. I've also, I would say I've been through a lot of deconstruction, and obviously, well, I would think it's obviously with Chip and I working so closely, I'm very much so a Christian. I've just, I think I think everybody deconstructs, but I think I had to do a lot of it just because a lot of the unhealthy stuff that I acquired. But so I don't pastor a church anymore, but still very much so do a lot of pastoral work with Seacoast.
Yeah. And not to, make anybody uncomfortable, specifically Joey. When he says he's dealt with depression and anxiety, we're not talking about kindergarten level. We're talking about some really, really severe stuff. And the cool thing is the 2019 that Joey's referring to, and I don't want to steal anything because you might share some of that later in the broadcast, but he finally got doctors that put together the right mix of medications. And since that time, I've known Joey for 14 years, I think. And since that time, I've never seen him so consistently just in a good place. Doesn't mean he doesn't have challenges, struggles. Doesn't mean he doesn't have a bad day here or there like the rest of us. But I'm talking about, I've not seen him go into the place he used to go pretty cyclically and regularly. And again, I'm probably emphasizing it on purpose. What's gotten him there is the correct, if you'll forgive me, cocktail of medications. And Joey's learned to be more assertive about it, about getting the care that he needs. And it's been fun to watch.
Thanks, man. Well, I would also say, too, though, that awful season was a catalyst for me recognizing how I needed therapy as a regular flow. Like, Chip is a therapist, pastor, and friend, so I know I can go to him anytime, but I also have, like, a regular therapist that I visit kind of for a habitual, checking in sort of thing. So doing that regularly for the last 6 years, I think has been huge also. And Chip, just to make the story fully complete, like I was on medication for most of my life, most of the time. Yeah. And what led to my mental health crisis was me getting off my medication. Right. I tampered off of my meds just because I thought that I was healthy enough to do so. And I just wanted to try it because medicine affects your libido. It affects emotions and stuff. So it's just one of those things to where I hadn't tried in a really long time. And I recognize that I'm not trying that ever again unless Jesus appears in a vision and then proves to me that it's him somehow.
Yeah. Both his wife and me, and maybe some others, were really ticked when we found out he dipped and gotten in a bad spot. And I'd never seen it that bad. We'd seen it before, so I just didn't think much about it. And then when he told me he had gotten off his medication, gosh, I was mad. I just could have wrung his neck, man. Now, obviously, I didn't show him that or say that to him till now. Well, let me ask you guys, Josh and Virgil, have you ever taken advantage of mental health services of any kind?
Yeah. I feel like my calls with you are mental health services. I meet with you every month. Yeah. And it was something that I needed in this season of life. I was listening to your, 8-minute mind shift, 7-minute mind shift thing you were doing during COVID. And I was entering a crazy season of life and knew I needed somebody to talk to. My uncle's a psychiatrist. He's retired now, but I would call him from time to time and just say, am I crazy? And he'd say, no, you're not crazy. You just need to think about it this way or connect it to this. So other than that, no, I hadn't had mental health services on the regular. Looking back now at the progress that I've had with you, Chip, you've been phenomenal. It's been 3 years. Man, I wish I would have started talking to somebody sooner, specifically being in ministry and having an outlet. I'm finding that's the danger zone, to be doing ministry and not have an outlet. You can't talk to your staff. Sometimes your wife doesn't understand. And the way that governance is set up, you're afraid to talk to somebody because you might get in trouble. Yeah. And so I'm grateful for it now. I wish I would have started sooner. Dealt with a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression that I didn't know it was depression till the season was over, and look back and say, wait a second, that was 3 years of darkness that, man, I probably could have avoided had I just had somebody to talk to and maybe even get some help medically.
Yeah. Tell them how we finally met.
Gosh. So I sent Chip my wife sent me some messages. We were getting ready to take over or step into the lead role of a mega church as well as a founding pastor. 40 years he had pastored, so it was just daunting to be the new guy. And I was just feeling the pressure. I know I'm qualified. I know God's there, but the size and load. So she just started sending me these little clips on Instagram. You might like this guy. I just found this guy. So I started watching him. I DM'd him a couple times. I don't think Chip knows how to run Instagram, or he just was ignoring me. Maybe he's got so much fan mail, mine just fell between the cracks. But
let's go with the latter. With the latter.
I basically said, "Hey, man, I love this stuff. Are you taking clients, or anybody can get some time on your calendar?" And he didn't respond. And then I realized I'm going to be at Seacoast. I was coming for the ARC conference. This is 3 or 4 years ago now. And it didn't even hit me till the plane landed. I'm like, wait, Chip is at this church. He's going to be at this conference. So I messaged a couple Seacoast guys that I knew. Hey, do you know Chip? Can you connect me? And for 2 days, they were like, we'll find him. We'll connect you guys. And I was ticked. I couldn't find him. Nobody could connect me. He's busy. He's in the green room eating lobster tails or something. I don't know. And
he's signing autographs while he's doing it,
Totally. It was the last session of the last day, and I kind of give it up. Well, maybe I'm not going to meet him. And I got my hands up in worship. I'm in the first row of the balcony, and during worship, Chip come in and sat in the last row of the front section. I'm like, it's him right there. And I told my buddies I was with, I said, hey, I'm going to skip out and go catch that guy after this is over. Don't leave me. Well, he saw him check his phone. He must have had a call, so he skipped out during worship. I just followed him out in the hallway, and he went out in the courtyard, took his call, and I just stood there. I got a cup of coffee. I'm not missing him. I'm going to grab him now. And he came in, and I just said, hey, I'm Josh Roberts. I said, you're Chip Judd? He said, yeah. And I said, hey, I've been trying to get in touch with you. He said, yeah, I don't answer that thing. I'm not interested. And I said, well, I'd love to connect with you. I'd love some time. I'll pay you for it, whatever. I love your stuff. And he said, well, I'm not taking any new clients. I don't really do that, and I'm busy. And tell me what's going on. And 3 minutes later, he's like, all right, want you, here's my email. Email me and we'll get a call. And he took my call a couple of weeks later, and man, it's been great. I'm so grateful for Chip Judd in my life. He's a godsend for me, for my church, for my staff, for my running mates. And I'm grateful that the Lord really put him in my life. Even this last season's been emotional watching Chip walk through his battle, because I know the value that he brings to the body of Christ, and I'm grateful to have a cheerleader in my corner and someone that can help me articulate what's happening between my ears when I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Josh, let me ask Chip, I got to know what, and I think your listeners would be very interested also because of the type of work that you go traveling to different churches. What happened so fast for you to go from, well, I mean, I'm not really taking on any clients to, okay, we'll talk. Let me get your number. Like, what was it? What did Josh say to pique your interest and to want some closeness there?
One of the key features I look for in a leader is, and you can say it one of two ways. To me, it's two sides of the same coin: teachable and humble. And 2 minutes of conversation, and I thought, this guy's hungry. And I love working with somebody who's hungry. And to be honest with you, I felt that God thing, and there's probably run together, but and I liked him. I immediately was like, I think I'd enjoy running with this guy, because he wasn't religious, he wasn't. No, he was stalking me. That was a little creepy.
Sometimes you got to get after it, guys. You got to go get what you need. And I'll be honest with you, I'm that guy. I'm not going to sit
and
I
respected it. I respected it. And but mostly that, Joey, I just sensed, like, forgive me, this is going to sound tacky to some people. It's easier and more rewarding to move a 6 to an 8 than it is a 2 to a 4.
Oh, yeah.
Now, it's rewarding to move a 2 to a 4. Forgive me, I shouldn't have said that way. But it's harder to move a 2 to a 4 than it is a 6 to an 8. And I could tell Josh was a pretty well functioning, just the way he communicated, the way he looked me in the eye and all. I thought, okay, this guy's got something to work with. And so
are there certain,
I probably had 5 or 6 times in my life where I met somebody And as soon as I met them, I knew this is a God thing. And Josh was one of those where I thought there's something going on here that did not originate with us. And I mean, I've never even heard the whole story like he just gave, so that was pretty cool. Virgil, how about you? Have you ever had to take advantage of mental health?
Well, interesting story. So before I went into full-time ministry, I got my master's degree as an occupational therapist, which is OT is a health profession that kind of runs along kind of rehabilitation along with,
Sure.
PT and speech. But OT has a little bit of a mix with also just with mental health as well. In fact, when I was working at Jackson North Medical Center in North Miami Beach, I was kind of one of those OTs. I could do therapy in any context. Pediatric therapy, with kids. I could do geriatric therapy, older adults, physical dysfunction. But then there was a season where I had to run mental health wellness groups on the psychiatric ward of the hospital that I was working on.
Man.
So I had a very up close and personal. Initially, I didn't have a lot of experience in that area, and it ended up being something very, very rewarding for me as a therapist in that role. And I say that because that is a high. It's a heavy atmosphere. The psychiatric ward is a heavy atmosphere, and we're talking about a lot of diagnoses, a lot of medication, a lot of dysfunction, and I would say a lot of soul, spiritual, a lot of everything. And so that awakened me, because I've always had a pastor's heart. I've always been in ministry. I was the worship pastor for my dad at that time. And I remember thinking, wow, the Lord must have me here for a reason. And in that atmosphere, it made me highly aware, maybe of the extremes, right? Of the extremes that people can get to when they're not well in their soul, in their mind.
Right.
And so as a pastor, you see a lot. Having the background as a therapist, occupational therapist, it helped me understand a little bit more the connections between kind of the medical side, the behavioral side, the therapeutic side, and then I'm a pastor, so the spiritual side behind of all this,
Sure.
it awakened me a lot in my personal life. I'm kind of I'm a joy bringer and I'm a Tigger. I don't know if that in the sense of I've never by the grace of God had a personal struggles until kind of marriage, like pastoring together with my wife, and then that dynamic, which was one of the ways, Chip, that we connected with you. When I first met you, it was at a retreat at Church Creek, a retreat that we were there with some pastors, and Pastor Greg said, "Hey, Pastor Chip is here, and he's got some time if you guys want to schedule some time." And I said, "I'd love to talk to him." And I remember talking to you just for a moment. I said, "Wow, it would be really beneficial for me and my wife to have the opportunity if possible." And that's when we followed up, and we had a few sessions of just as a marriage, as hey, we're walking through this, pastoring together, the blessings and the challenges of that, and you helped us on multiple occasions where we sat down to just process and understand what we were walking through. You asked hard questions, which caused us to continue the conversations. So I would say in my life, I have sought out, I would say more recently in the last 5 years, I've sought out, I've done a little bit of work with Lance Witt also on the area of soul care and just coaching me. I've sought out, kind of like Josh, I've sought out mentors and people who can help me because I've realized without necessarily having, a heavy breakdown or a diagnosis, I've realized that I want to stay ahead of it, and it's been helpful for me to talk with the right people along my journey. And I have a question for you, Chip, because being a health professional before stepping into ministry, they're two different worlds. The pastoral, spiritual world, right, and then the medical, and they don't really align, so to speak. You have a very interesting perspective, also as a pastor, but as a professional in psychology. I'm curious as to, just from your experience and your years and your interaction, what do you see about these two worlds that melds well together, but then also
Yeah.
how do they differ?
Yeah. Well, to be honest with you, that's what the podcast's about. And that's what, that's kind of my mission, I feel like, because, I got saved and I was 22 or 3, can't remember. And I've always been a person that others like to talk to and open up and stuff. And, you don't know what to do with it. You don't even really notice it. You just kind of whatever. Well, then I got saved and, when you get saved and you feel called to ministry, what do? You pastor. So I was pastoring and, but I used to say I was a pastor who did a lot of counseling. The truth is I was probably a counselor who happened to be pastoring. But the bottom line is I hit a point where my church wasn't doing that well. And my wife and I were walking one day and I said, baby, what am I any good at that I could get paid for? Because really I was just looking for a side job. And she said, well, what about counseling? And, talk to some of my pastor friends, just like you guys are talking about. And to be honest with you, every one of them discouraged me. Every one of them discouraged me to go the counseling direction. Every one of them. Wow. I mean, in fact, by the time the dust settled and I had my master's, I had lost some friends over this very issue.
Wow.
And so the bottom line, Virgil, is we all three of us could get into theology. I was saved, I'm being saved, I'm yet to be saved. Well, what do you mean, dude? I was saved in my spirit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm being saved where? In my soul. And I'm yet to be saved in my body at the return of the Lord. Well, if you look at that, past, I was saved. I can't get any more saved than I am, which is a revelation some people need.
Mm-hmm.
But I was saved, past tense, done. I'm being saved, present tense, a process that's in motion. And then I'm yet to be saved, my body, and I can't do anything about that. So what's the one area that we can make progress in? What's the one area in my own life and the lives of those to whom I get to minister? The area, the juicy spot of ministry is the soul. the renewal and renovation of the soul. So, I believe the conversation we're having right now is the most important conversation needed in the body of Christ right now. I really do. I don't believe we need to learn more about worship. I don't believe we need to learn more about leadership. Dear God, we've got enough on leadership to choke us, which I think it is, by the way. But in this area, I hope that made sense. But let me turn around a question for you guys. How many pastors do you know? And again, I just mean percentage-wise. But if you just thought about the ones you're close to and not close to, you just observe from a distance, read their books, whatever. What percentage of pastors would you guys say see it the way we're seeing it?
Very few. Very few in our circle. I've come from a Word of Faith camp. We're charismaniacs.
Which I do too.
It's kind of I don't know. It's a tough conversation because it comes down to, for those guys immediately, we just don't have enough faith.
Right.
You just don't have enough faith. You're not in church enough.
Yeah.
You're not reading your word. You don't know the Lord. You need to go deeper. And but they wouldn't say that if you had a back problem. They wouldn't say that if you had a kidney problem. You'd see a specialist. You'd see somebody who can help you with that specific.
Yeah.
And because of that, I think it's been not only overlooked, I think we've done this next generation a disservice because there's a lot of challenges going on, but they're afraid to ask. And then they wouldn't even know who to ask. Who would I call? We don't have this. It's not readily available. Now, you want a breakthrough conference, you want more resources? We got a conference for that. You need a deliverance service? We got some Pentecostals to throw up in a bucket. We got those people. You need marriage stuff? We got that. We've got all these other things, but when it comes to the soul, the mind, I love that you brought it up. We believe we are a three-part being. We're a spirit, soul, and body. Go to healthcare. We push the gym. Go to the gym. We push the spirit. Go sit under the word. Let the water of the washing of the word strengthen your inner man. But what about the soul, our mind, our will, and our emotions? I'm bringing it up because it's been a powerful piece of my story as of late. Like I said, I wish I would have known how to access help, resources, tools earlier. And I think part of my calling now is to help expose this with my running mates and people in my life to say, wait a second, you got a little bit more going on than you're giving yourself credit for. And guess what? There's some people out there like a Chip Judd that, man, they can help you. You need some time with Chip.
Yeah.
Yeah, Pastor Josh.
Well, then
I
we
think
need to find. Excuse me, Joey. Just let me say this: we need to find some more Chips. And it's tricky.
There's a young man in our church. He's a great young man. He's in his 20s. He's going to be a part of some things we're doing moving forward. And he's getting his degrees. He's getting his mental health counseling degree. Starts an internship this week. And I gave him your book this week. I said, I'm going to set you up with Chip Judd. I said, you need a forerunner and a finisher in your life. He's just starting in this space. It's his calling. So I want to tag team you as bringing the generations together. So I've got a guy in-house.
Well, that's one of the things I want to do. I want to pull counselors this way.
Yeah.
And the best time to catch him is what you're talking about right there. Because here's what will happen. He'll get it. Again, I'm not saying this over him, but typically, because I've had lots of people over the years say, I want to do what you do. And I'll tell them the path they have to follow. Well, here's what happens. They get through and they go to the supervision and all the stuff they have to do. And what happens is they get sucked up into that world. Yeah. And number one, you can make more money. Number two, they kind of pressure you, to be honest, and they have a way of doing things that they kind of look down their nose at us a bit, and they next thing you know, I'm counseling. I said, what are you doing with your church? How are you helping your church? Well, it just didn't work out. I'm like, whatever, man, whatever.
Yeah, but Chip, don't you think that that's probably due to a lot of churches where, Josh made this, as far as, man, a lot of churches haven't made a whole lot of progress. Maybe they came from churches like that. But those people, so that may not be the case. So,
well, there's no doubt that's true. The church on the whole, and that's part of what this conversation's about. And if you guys are up for it, I wouldn't mind doing some more down the road. But churches don't know we haven't figured out how to make that mesh yet. I mean, I'm at Seacoast, I'm on staff at Seacoast, and I've been whittling away at it. I've been here 14 years. Well, you could watch the language change. You could watch the thought process. You could hear it showing up in some messages. And I mean, the progression has been such that, for crying out loud, we've opened our own counseling service now. I mean, we've got a full-blown counseling practice. And but I'll be honest with you, the two don't flow together as well as they could. And I'll deal with whatever I have to deal with. Sam having said that. But whatever. There's just there's a language barrier. There's a practice barrier. There's a pride barrier.
Chip, do you think it has to do with the size of the church too? I mean, growing up, it was smaller churches, a couple hundred people. Man. The pastor handles that, but he's not a counselor at his capacity at the greatest level he can. But then there's some people who's like, dude, I don't know what to do, and he doesn't have the resource. But the larger the church and organization get, the more exposure, and you realize, wait a second, because God's given us more, we have to steward this well. Now we need to talk about this, because I don't just have one person that's depressed that I've been meeting with, or one person that's anxious. Man, I got all kinds of people coming out the woodwork. They're brand new to faith, and they came with issues.
Right.
And so I think as the churches get bigger and the influence gets greater, the resources, maybe Virgil, you could speak to that too. It sounds like you guys have a pretty rocking work. Was there a point where you realized, wait a second, we're seeing more of this now?
Yeah. Well, I'll say I know there's a lot of churches who run some kind or some form of freedom group. We do freedom groups here,
right?
And we have an interesting culture because we have a lot of Hispanic. We do English and Spanish, but we do both. And even though there are differences culturally, there are similarities and the same percentage and need for it. And one of the things that we have found, I would say, since my tenure, in these last 10 years that I've been pastoring, I would say that when we ask people the question, how has our church, how has Vertical Church made a positive impact in your life, right? Obviously, it's the Lord, but what has stood out? One of the things that comes to the top of the list for most people is freedom when they've done it, because it is a journey where we're helping people address issues of the soul. It is highly spiritual and biblical, in the frame, which as Christians that's what we want. But it really takes the time to connect or attach the aspect of emotions, the aspect of my mind, my thoughts, my well-being. I think I mentioned this in conversation with Chip, but everybody is so desiring to open the door to their tomorrow, but they haven't closed so many doors from yesterday. And I think that's the hang up, that's the weight, that's the burden. So in our context, we're seeing it honestly in every age group, and maybe even in older generations, there's a little bit of a stigma, or there's a little bit of we don't do that touchy-feely stuff. We don't, you don't need counseling. You just need to read the word and pray and we want to do that. But that mentality can sometimes block that generation. So if that generation didn't pour it or teach it or model it, then there's a generation we're trying to figure it out. And so I think for me, I have felt like I'm bridging the generation, since I'm my father founded our church. I get his generation, but I also get the generation coming behind. So how do we bridge, and how do we begin to normalize things that maybe this generation didn't see as normal or needed, but then bring it to a way where this is relevant, this is necessary, and I think our people are crying for it. People are like, okay, I had never spoken about some of these things. We do it with men and women with women, so it even opens the door for people to really get vulnerable. And everybody in my groups, in a freedom group session, like context, they say, I don't think I've ever told anybody most of what I've expressed here, because it requires that vulnerability and it requires that realness, that authenticity. And so I think when it comes to discipleship, I've heard you talk about that, Chip, like soul care and mental health should be at the center of discipleship. And I see it the same way.
Yeah. I mean, I would put it this way, and have that it's probably still the more common perspective that mental health and all of that is like a hospital off in the corner of our property, when it should be dead center in the pathway we call discipleship. If discipleship is removing the obstacles between us and the version of us God created us to be, then those obstacles are resonant in our souls. So anything that ministers to our soul, delivers our soul, prospers our soul, restores our soul, should be considered part of discipleship. And if we could get both sides, the pastor side and the counselor side, to see that if you're called to be a mental health professional, you're called to help prosper souls and remove resistance and blockages and whatever. And I don't know. I'm excited because these conversations are easier and easier to have. I'm excited. You guys are just wrestling with it, and you're proactive about it. I mean, I've been doing this since I got saved in 76. Got my master's in the late 80s, but I was already counseling, and basically I was doing freedom stuff. Back then we called it life enrichment. But it was same. It's all the same principles, just repackaged a little bit. Gosh, you wouldn't believe the grief I get, particularly through the 80s. It was horrible, man. And one of the verses they would always quote was 2 Corinthians 5:17. If any man be in Christ, he's a new creation. Behold, all things become new, or whatever. And they'd say, well, why do you need to talk about your past? It's under the blood, whatever. Right. And I'd be like, oh my gosh. And I wish I had $1 for every time somebody said that to me. But that same pastor, he'd catch me off to the side in private sometime, and he'd start pouring his heart out. And God would use me to, touch him or bless him or do something. And I wouldn't do it right then, but later I'd say, now you realize that little breakthrough you had, we talked about your past to get there. Because maybe it went back to your dad or your mom or whatever. And it's been fun.
Chip, that really was a click, a light bulb that went off, that mental health is really seen as something kind of like in addition to, like, discipleship is the centerpiece. We all need to draw closer to Jesus, and hey, watch out for your mental health. But it's like, if we follow Jesus's teachings and we really take in Scripture. We would be taking in good mental health teachings and principles. That's wow.
I mean,
One and
if
the
you look at
same sort of thing.
yeah, if you look at the Sermon on the Mount a certain way, it's a mental health thing. The peaceful, the all of those. Blessed are those who mourn. What does that mean? Healthy grief, among other things. But
well, I want to say too, I think a lot of people are just prideful. They don't want anybody. Again, I'm gonna go back to my camp. I can speak for my guys. They're ashamed. They don't want to talk to anybody about their problems. They don't want anybody to know they have any problems. So they live a life covered. Then what happens is when things get exposed, when sin overtakes, moral failures happen, now you're forced into it. And a lot of guys don't even bounce back from that. They're still rejected. No, I'm not doing that. It was a one-time thing. It's like, no, that's been a pattern in your life this whole time. Yeah. You're the only one that can't see it.
Right.
I think there's a piece of this too where humility is a big piece, man. And if you're not humble, you're not gonna be able to hear it. That I remember somebody talked to me years ago. They said, "You realize it's a pattern in your life, something I was dealing with." And I said, "What?" And they said, "You can't see that." They said, "You keep going from this to this to this. It's about a 3-year cycle." Wow. And them saying that was like, "Wait a second, he's right." Now the question is, we've identified it. Now, how am I going to make it so it's not a cycle moving forward? I didn't know how. I needed some help. Surround myself with people and expose it for what it is. This is a cycle. This is a cycle that keeps chasing me down, and I'm losing every time.
Right.
I don't want to do this the rest of my life. Now I have some humility to say, "Hey, I've noticed something. Do you see it in me, and can you help me get past it?" There is a humility piece in this that's required to walk forward in your mental health growth.
Yeah. Chip, I wanted to mention something that from my perspective, I'm curious to see if you guys are seeing it too. But I'm seeing that there's a young generation that's coming up, and they're not buying the just pray and
right.
They're not buying the just suck it up and you shouldn't be going through that. There's a young generation that's leaning into authenticity, and we've actually been in a series called Overcomers, and we've been addressing very specific things all the way from Easter. Jesus is the overcomer, but then we attacked overcoming addiction and overcoming insecurity. And I had one of our youth pastor's wife, who she's doing a great job. She came to our church when she was 6. She was discipled by my wife. Wow. She's now in her mid to late 20s. She's an amazing leader. And I said, "You're going to preach, and you're going to preach," because she was ready on your testimony. And she delivered a message on overcoming anxiety. And so this is a young lady who came to Jesus literally when she was 6 with her family. She's grown up here in church, around church. She's been faithful. She has been honoring to her parents. She has been top notch as far as serving the Lord, loving the Lord, being a disciple, discipling. And about 4 or 5 years ago, had a very, very significant anxiety attack and hospitalization, and like a whole nother level of concern. Her husband, who was our youth pastor, like all the time when he was stepping into ministry, and we're talking about Baker acted. We're talking about a process of rehabilitation and recovering, and how could this? And so when people heard her, now on the other side, healed, the process of being on medication and understand maybe how humbling she felt in the moment, but then understanding this is part of the process of healing. Right. I would say that message was one of the most powerful moments for our whole church to hear from the voice of a person who was born, like literally since a child. She wasn't the prodigal who went away and got in the world. Right. Church, married, having children, but having children, and this happens, and she's able to preach now from a position of victory. And hey, this is a continuous journey, but there's a generationship, and I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a young generation who's hungry and looking for help.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say the hurdle we've got to work with that generation on is they look for something outside of themselves to be their solution. Mm. It's kind of a soft version of a victim mindset. Mm. And I don't mean all of them. Any principle's not, everybody's not prone to it, but yeah, that's exciting. And I agree. I would say, I'm 71, and who loves my teaching the most is younger leaders like yourselves, and even younger. The younger they get, the more they like it, because I'm kind of raw a little bit, but I'm also practical. Mm-hmm. I'm saying, well, if you're dealing with this, you need to look at this, mm-hmm. and able to connect the dots. Like I just did a 4-week series for Mental Health Awareness Month, and I hope you checked it out. If you haven't, please do. Mm-hmm. Number one, I'd like your feedback. But number two, let me tell you the goal of it. The goal of it was to begin to lay a foundation for how to understand why a born-again Christian loves God in church, reads their Bible, blah, 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 but can still have some area of their life where they act like the devil himself. How can that be? And I believe biblically there's ways to explain it. But we got to learn a little bit.
Right.
We got to say, okay, like the second, I think it's the second message in the 4-part thing. I talk about how we become the way that we are. I might have ministered that at your church, Josh. I can't remember. But basically just 3 areas. How do you become the way you are? Genetics and multi-generational predisposition, early life imprints, and then your life choices. Now, you take those 3 things and you get to where you understand them. It's going to change the way you preach. It's going to change the way you preach on depression, anxiety, addiction, homosexuality, to be honest. It's going to change the way you sneak up on issues, and your people will love it. They will love it. Yeah. Because what it does, I titled that series, forgive me if I sound like a commercial, but I titled it Shades of Grace, Exploring a Jesus-Shaped Culture. Why could Jesus look at a woman caught in the act of adultery and say, your sins are forgiven, go, sin no more? Now, I don't think he meant, don't you dare ever sin again. I think he meant, get to the bottom of what got you in this spot.
Yeah.
And there's a way to do that. And it affects how you speak to people. It affects what you expect of people. And whatever. I could ramble all day, so just tell me to shut up.
So, Chip, is the mental health profession, Christian or not, participating in discipleship, whether they like it or not? Like, if they're a good therapist and they don't know the Lord, are they participating in being a discipler? I'm playing around with words and semantics and
I understand.
philosophy here.
Yeah. I mean, the way I'd say it, and I'd love to hear what you guys think. The way I'd say it is, as long as they have some complementary, overarching help spiritually, because if it's a non-Christian counselor, they're definitely going to, at the very least, if not worse, they're going to draw someone in the direction of self-sufficiency, and you're already in trouble. You're already screwed.
Right.
You're So you'd be surprised how many Christian counselors. That means they are a Christian and they are a counselor. But you'd be surprised how few have properly integrated those two. In other words, I'm a Christian in here, I'm a Christian out there, but you might never know it. And that's what I meant earlier about the mental health profession and the licensure body and all of that getting in your head, because they'll have you convinced you can't pray with people. They'll have you convinced that you can't talk about God.
Right.
Now, what I used to do is, because it might shock you, but I get a lot of unsaved people come to me as a counselor. And I'd say, now, you realize I'm a pastor, right? Oh, yeah, that's why I came to you. Why? Well, I figured you'd be safe and have your head on straight. I said, okay. And I can remember one, and this would be representative, where, 2, 3, 4 appointments in, I say, hey, where are you at with my bringing God into this process? I don't have to, but there's times when there's things that I could share with you that I think might be helpful. And I remember one lady I work with, she's on my highlight reel. And here's what she said. She kind of thought of it, and she said, okay, but let's call him the man in the corner. So from then on, I could talk about the man in the corner. And she ended up getting saved, baptized. I don't know about you guys, but this is on a highlight reel. I baptized her and served her communion for the first time in her life.
Dang.
I'm telling you, I still get goosebumps, man. The first time in her life she ever had communion.
That's cool.
Not and knew what it was, ever. She'd never had communion.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, it was precious. It's cool. But yeah, I agree. What about you guys? Like, I had if we needed space fillers, let me see if I can find this. What interactions or opinions have you had with or about psychology in the mental health community throughout your time of ministry? What concerns would a pastor have when he's saying you're meeting with one of your people and you realize, okay, this is beyond my capacity, both time, energy, and knowledge and skill and whatever. So you need to pass them into a mental health community process. What are you thinking? Like, what are your pros and cons of that?
I'm full pro. We have got to the place now where we are, our pastoral staff will meet with people. I don't allow them to meet with someone more than 3 times concerning a specific topic. If it needs more than 3 times, they need special help, whether it's a marriage counselor, whether it's a therapist, whether it's a psychiatrist,
Right.
because we're not equipped to that. So we set boundaries. I don't want to be liable
Right.
for giving people advice that we've not been trained or equipped on. And so what we've done is scoured and resourced who in our community is skilled and qualified and is filled with the Spirit and will point them back to Jesus that I feel safe sending them to.
Yeah.
And that's been the hard part. But now we have a list. The piece that makes me nervous is they want to talk to their pastor. Well, I don't want to talk to them. They have a stigma in their mind about going beyond me. I trust you. And I said, that's great. I'm not skilled and qualified in this. I've brought it to this point, but now I need to hand you to a specialist. And the biggest challenge I have is, will they take that next step?
Right.
And we use that verbiage. It's a phrase that we use with all kinds of times where it's time to refer somebody. Your next step is.
Right.
And we use it in every act, in any situation. We're dealing with financial issues. They keep giving benevolence requests. Well, your next step is to start tithing and honor God with the fruit you've been given.
Right.
Okay, will they take that next step? Will they trust God? No, maybe not. Well, you're going to keep running low on resource. Your next step is go to a marriage small group. Your next step is take your son and go meet with that counselor. Take your daughter. So my greatest challenge is, do I have enough buy-in with them that they trust the advice I'm giving them is outside of our 4 walls is going to help them?
Right.
And truthfully, we've had a lot of people come back and say, yeah, they just gave them coping mechanisms, or they just gave them this system, or they want them to do this. And it had nothing to do with a biblical stance pointing them to Jesus. And so there's that for us. We've had to change a bunch of stuff with our student ministry because, as Virgil said, man, our young people are hungry. But I don't want youth leaders just pointing them to put a rubber band on your wrist every time you have that thought, snap your wrist, that kind of stuff. Come on, man. It's got to be bigger than that. Nor do I want young people giving advice to kids that are cutting themselves, that have not been trained in self-harm or self-medicating. And so finding the right resources outside the church have been difficult. So now we're trying to develop, as you are and others, resources within the church. Hey, let me introduce you to my friend Riz. Riz is a certified counselor. This is his home. He's filled with the Holy Spirit. He is a young man. He can identify and through relationship enter that. And that's how it started with me and you, is can me and you have a relationship first? A lot of times there's a disconnect. I don't want to go.
Yeah.
They think they got to go lay on the couch in the office
Right.
at the
Right.
clinic. And so I think part of this is helping us to bridge the gap of even the mindset of what does it look like? Counseling's awesome. Every time I look, someone asked me recently, what's it like talking to Chip? I was like, dude, it's like talking to 70-year-old me. Just someone that's walked 40 more years, 30 more years than I have, and he can relate. They think, oh,
Why?
it's gonna be weird, you know.
Yeah. Why you got to talk about my age, man?
Well, I'm not. I'm almost 50, so I'm not far behind you. But you're a step ahead of me.
I'm teasing you, man. Listen, here's another part that in the right context we need to be able to say. It isn't all on us.
Yeah,
Because when you send that person to that counselor, they got to freaking do their job.
that's right.
And the other side of this coin is, and all you counselors who may hear this or hear it in some other context, some of them just aren't very good at what they do. Or they're good at this part of counseling and not this. And I'll give you grace for that. But like what you said about they think they're going to go and lie on a couch. Well, that's another aspect of what I meant about the pressure they get from the licensure board. Be creative when you meet with people. Meet with some of them over a cup of coffee. Change how the meeting feels. Cut some jokes. And I promise you, man, there's some I've talked to. Lord Jesus, they wouldn't do that. Oh, that's so unprofessional. I'm like, okay.
Well, I got to be honest with you and go back to what Virgil was talking about, the young people. Man, they're just looking for somebody they can relate to.
Yeah.
My first call with Chip, he's got records on the back wall. It's at the doors. I think he had a Led Zeppelin T-shirt on, and there was a Who poster or something. I'm like, oh my gosh, I grew up with 60s rock and roll. It's who my dad is. Like, wait, this is the guy that I'm going to be counseling with? You set me at ease with your T-shirt and your poster, and I think we could do it again. It's like the guy the pastor that always wears the suit and tie. It's like, dude, that thing's over.
Yeah.
There's a time and a season for that. But if you're a suit and tie guy, wear it and preach with a suit and tie. But if you're not, you're just doing it because you think that's the costume. Your church isn't going to grow. So I think the relatability piece is huge.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Virgil? Just that whole idea of...
Yeah, I was going to say on a similar thread, we had to come to a conclusion, especially, again, Hispanic culture, right? Pastor, they think the pastors, if it's not a pastor, they can't help it. If it is, then they can. And so we had to come to a point to give ourselves the permission to say, we are a church, we're not a counseling center yet, until the Lord leads us through that. And we had to be okay with that. And so what we did is we strategically partnered with multiple Christian counseling. We specifically aim for Christian counseling centers and Christian counselors that we said, hey, as a church, can we partner with you? If it's a member of the church, we will cover a certain amount of sessions. If it's somebody who's attending, we will also help them in some way. But can we come to a partnership? And we tell people, hey, when you have a paper cut, you can put a Band-Aid. We can take care of things. But sometimes you have a fracture, you can't put a Band-Aid on that. And so some people are coming with some heavy things that aren't going to get resolved in a session with a pastor or even in two. This is going to require some follow up. So we strategically did that. We have a challenge where sometimes in our context, we have a Spanish-only speaker, and then finding that sometimes has been tricky, which has put us in a place where we're praying about starting a counseling center with trained, certified, licensed counselors in the future, being able to do it in both languages. That's a big prayer that I have because we're seeing the need. We're seeing a huge need for it.
Right.
I want to piggyback real quick. Virgil, I'm a white guy that pastors an international church, and it's very difficult to have this conversation with nationalities because it's a social thing in their mind. It's been demonized that there's something wrong with them, and we have this thing too about the man of God.
Yeah,
and I'm like, bro, I'm a man of God. I'm not the man of God, and I think part of us too, it's a cultural thing. We have to break that down. I can't be all things to all men. I'll be who I can be. But I think there's a piece of this where we've leveraged the opposite. And it's hurting us now. Oh, he's the man of God. Because we've used it as control and manipulation in the past.
Yeah.
I'm the man of God. Why would you go do this outside this house? You should have come to us. Now it's flipping on us. And if we don't have the resources and you claim to be the man of God, then you better have all the answers. Comes back again to that humility thing. I don't have all the answers, but I know someone that does. Let me connect you to my friend Virgil. He speaks Spanish. He loves people. He's walked through this, and be willing to diversify. For a long time, the cultures have said the pastor is the only one that can do it. And I think there's a big piece of this too, of the diversity of the gifts. This is a gift. This is a gift that God's given people.
Yeah.
Chip has a gift that needs to be broadened and strengthened and developed and multiplied. Just like children's workers, just like worship leaders, just like anything you think that's going to help somebody in their advancement with their spiritual growth. So part of this is a two-edged sword. We've asked them to come and only let us be the guy that does everything. But now it's biting us in the butt when we don't have the answers.
Yeah. Chip, you know what's helped us in our context, and I say us, my wife and I, especially in our leadership, is we have begun to normalize in order to demystify counseling, and we have begun to normalize saying, oh yeah, when we preach together sometimes, my wife and I will say, oh yeah, when we meet with our marriage counselor,
Yes.
and so what we're saying, we're doing that.
Sure.
Because we don't have all the answers.
Absolutely.
And we need the voices.
Absolutely.
You know, and so what we're doing is we're creating a new terminology in some contexts where they weren't hearing that from my dad in that generation of pastors.
Right.
They weren't they weren't hearing that. And now we're saying, hey, and by the way, can I recommend finding a Christian counselor? That'll help your marriage. You know, it'll help you, you know. And so we have strategically and intentionally begun to use it in not, hey, go get it, is this has helped us. We want to recommend it for you.
Right. You know, I love the phrase language creates culture. And part of what I feel like I'm called to do is give you guys language to talk this stuff and put it in your sermons and give you ways to say it. I mean, you can get them lots of places, books and other people, but that's one of my goals. One of my goals is to get, like when I first got to Seacoast, we had I don't know, what do we call it, Joey, care team or something. And, you know, whatever, I would say it was very over spiritualized, and probably if not the first, the second, but I'm talking like way at the front end. I met with the team, and I was kind of the de facto leader now that I'm in. And so I think I gave it a meeting or so, not very many though. And I just got mad. I said, okay, time out, guys. We got to change some stuff. I said, number one, our terminology is horrible. It's horrible. What is our target? Our target is people outside of the church. Our target is people who don't live in church, don't work for church, they come to church. Well, guess what? They don't talk like this. They don't talk like this, man. Mm-hmm. And I picked up a brochure that we had, even for freedom. And I said, this is embarrassing. It's embarrassing. You know, 100 people in our church would read this and know what it's saying. Change it. Like, for example, I said, and this isn't really a spiritual issue, but I said, don't ever use the term support groups. Don't ever use it again. Why? Because as soon as a person out in the congregation hears support groups, they think addiction recovery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they right away go, well, I'm not an addict.
Yeah.
So guess what? They don't hear another word you're saying.
It's not for me.
Well, what do you want us to call them? Call them growth groups. Call them life groups. Call them whatever you want to call them. Do not call them support groups.
Right.
And I think it took a year to get him to stop. But what was so cool is slowly but surely our language changed. And the way we would look at a situation, talk about that situation, come up with solutions. Like I love this quote, how you define a problem shapes your solution. How you define a problem. Mm-hmm. Well, if I believe the problem is you're not reading your Bible enough, I'm going to shape a solution that's just, not only is it not helpful, it's shaming. And we end up doing more harm than good. Now, some of what I just said applies to the other side of this discussion, the mental health community. They love their language. They love talking like, man, this, words that are this long. And I've told several of them over the years that want to be more engaging and relevant. And I'll say, well, you got to change the way you talk. Don't use these big, crazy words. You don't have to diagnose somebody. And I know if you're charging them and they're going to get medication, you got to do the DSM-4 and 5 or whatever we're on now, and whatever. But you don't have to label everybody. And There's just some simple things we can do. And
You and Greg have helped us and our guys, specifically the retreat center, and it goes back to what Virgil was saying. Like when you normalize it for yourself, it makes it normal for everybody else.
yeah,
When you said to our team, "We're all jacked up," starting with me.
yeah,
Wait a second,
yep,
he's the pastor.
yep,
He was depressed. I talk about my depression. I talk about anxiety. I talk about it all the time. It's a big part of my life
right,
because it's
right,
freedom for me. I'm not where I used to be, and I want them to have
right,
health. And you know what? The number one thing I hear of why people come to church said, "Man, you're relatable. We
yep,
can relate to your stories, man,
absolutely,
because we're going through that
absolutely,
now. Will you pray with us and will you meet with us?" And it's like, go back to this thing with Virgil, like what you're doing is powerful because it's opening the door for the next generation to get what they need. We're setting them up for greater success than the generation
Yeah,
before us,
totally.
where we didn't want anybody to know. Most pastors' kids, and I'm one, you're one, we don't talk about the problems to the church people. Nobody's going to know that we yell in our house. Nobody's going to know that we have dysfunction. We have to put on this pretty picture all the time. And dude, that's a scary place to be too. And as soon as we could take that mask off and be like, I'm jacked up too, and I'm on a journey. Now we've paved the road for everybody else because the trust of the man of God or the pastor, if he's walking that journey, oh, it's safe for me too. I think
yeah,
that's the thing we've got to do, Chip, even greater is stop making it look like the man of God's got it all together and you're the ones that are jacked up and that's why I have the pulpit and you're sitting in the pew.
Right.
Dude,
right,
I'm just the guy that's chosen to speak this week, and next week he can remove me and put somebody else in here. I
yeah,
think that's how you build relationships.
right,
Transparency.
right, yeah. Gosh, there's so much we could talk about. We probably need to think about winding up. Um, Man, this has been good, man. It's been fun. Y'all want to do it again? Would you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right. Um, Something I was thinking about. How could we always talk about how to develop our homegrown leaders. What if we could develop homegrown counselors?
Mm.
Like for instance, now this is not a perfect plan, trust me. You go to your 20-year-old guy you're talking to, Josh. And this is totally off the top of my head, so it's going to be very flawed. And you sit down and you talk and you say, hey, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Well, I want to be working with you, and I want to be using my gifts in this way and counseling, and I want to bring that into the church. Let's say he's savvy enough that he can say something somewhere along those lines, right? So then you say, or maybe he can't, and you do, and you say, well, this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for someone that they can have a counseling practice on the side, but their focus is the kingdom of God, the kingdom of God, the kingdom of God. And yeah, they may not make as much money, but they're going to make a good living. And you kind of talk it out, and the kid says, "I'm in, man. That's what I want. That's what I want right there. That's what I want." Well, then what if we said, okay, it sounds like you got a plan. I assume you're figuring out a way to pay for it. Here's the deal. We'll give you X amount toward it. Nowhere near paying for it, though, because here's my point. You don't want to set yourself up to have a problem when they get pulled somewhere else. But you do it enough to make a statement of support, but not so much that you're screwed later. But here's what you do say. I assume you may have to take out loans. As long as you stick with our plan, we'll pay back your loans. If you don't stick with us, we're not going to pay back your loans.
Mm-hmm.
See what I'm trying to do there? What I'm trying to figure out, and I'm not saying that's a perfect plan, but what I'm trying to say is, how could we get people to go outside of the church to get the training they need, but stay in the church?
Right. That's a good perspective and approach. And my wife and I are praying. We're really praying about this because of the need we're identifying, because of the reality that we have a lot of people that don't just need counseling, but they really need it in Spanish, and there's a limitation there. And so we're seeing This is a huge need, not to mention just in the church, not to mention outside, with everybody. So I love that idea. And even now there's a few young people, kind of new grads, that are literally finishing their their degrees in counseling or in psychology, and I'm thinking in my head, how do we call it out in them, right? How do we tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, we see ministry in you. We see, I mean, this is how it's been for me on the key people that the Lord's put in the journey. But you tap them on the shoulder, and I see something. We're envisioning something for the future. Do you see it? Do you feel it? But being intentional. I find myself in that tension right now of, okay, we're building the church. This might not be what the normal, build the church categories and positions are, but if we're really going to disciple well and shepherd well, I think there's something there. There's something there.
Well, if we believe that psychology and some of the tricks of the trade of mental health should be a part of our mainstream discipling process, then it is how we should build our staff for the future.
Yeah.
I thought, I'm just thinking of different ways you could even tweak it. You'd have to check in each of your states. But like in South Carolina, the whole licensure website ends with this statement. And I need to double check, make sure it still does. But it ended with this statement. Unless, in other words, everything we just said is not applicable if you work under the auspices or sponsorship of a local church. So here's the thing. Most people don't know this. I'm not licensed. I'm not a licensed counselor. Why? Because when I started the process, I realized all it got me was third-party payment, insurance and whatever. I didn't plan on doing that. And what I realized was I'm going to pay a bunch of money for one thing. And then here's the deal. If you come under their umbrella, you got to live by their rules. Well, I don't have to live by their rules. Now, there's some of them I do. Some of the big ones, obvious ones. But I've had a 35-year career counseling, all of it virtually, maybe 2%, all of it under the auspices and sponsorship of a local church. Now, my point being, I'd want to be open and really straightforward and honest with the people, but you could literally, if your states operate the same way ours does, you could literally talk to one of these young people and say, here's the deal. You don't have to be licensed. And that cuts out a lot of expense and keeps them out of a situation where they're being discipled by a secular system.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to just say that what you guys are talking about is we're living in the same place, Virgil, because I'm outsourcing a lot of this.
Yeah.
There's a young lady in Fort Worth that's been, we got connected with her through some other people. She's part of the Gateway Network and stuff. She's phenomenal. This morning, I gave a referral to her again. She's meeting with all of the women on my team, which is 10 plus. And then anybody else that comes, they love her. Dr. Cass, I just give her. So they recognized her there. So they brought her in just like they would a worship leader or a children's pastor or a campus pastor. And I think part of this is you've got to recognize, again, we vocalize the gifts. Hey, we have a need for worship leaders. Well, of course, we're going to talk about that. We're going to raise up worship leaders, missions directors, campus pastors. Right. It takes a pastor like Chip and like Virgil and Joey to say, well, wait a second. As our church gets larger, the needs are going to be greater.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great to have some people on our team or right here under this roof? And I think that's I think it's powerful, again, because when they're tied in-house, it's so much better. It's not this virtual thing. I love Chip, and my greatest challenge with Chip is I don't get to see him enough. I want to go hang out with him. I want to see him on a Sunday. I want to play golf with him. I want to drink coffee. So when they're in the house, it's even tighter of, wait a second, that person goes to our church. I know them. I've seen them. And they can serve here in the house. I think it's powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now you just touched on an example of what I meant earlier about some of the rules that you'd be forced to live under. They would call what you just described with me, they would call that a dual role relationship. And they would not allow me to see you as a counselor. Because if I'm your friend, I can't be your counselor. And I think it's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Well, again, I only want to be. I'm not going to go to a counselor if I don't have some sort of relationship.
Absolutely.
For me,
absolutely.
And I think for most Christians, that's the thing. That trust barrier is like, are they credible? Do I know them? And am I just a dollar to them?
Right.
You've texted me,
And
Chip, multiple times. You know I've been walking through a bunch of stuff. Even this week, you text, "Hey man, how you doing? How you?" Remember, grief is an emotion. It's a powerful honoring tool. You know, outside of that, I'm like, I don't want to just have to check in. I want somebody that cares for my soul in a greater level, and it comes under the pastoral guidelines,
yeah.
pastoral covering per se,
Right. Right.
which brings even
Well,
more
we better
validity
wind
to
this
it,
up.
right?
Um,
Because we can offer through the church something that a counseling can't. I'm not on call. You have to pay. You got to set up an appointment. It's like, no, man, I'd like to have some people that knew if I need something, I could text it. And obviously, there has to be boundaries and those kind of things. I get that. But
absolutely.
man, you've made yourself available, dude. You said outside of our call, you need something, call me, text me. That's meant the
Right.
world beyond the regular
Right.
monthly call.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a much shorter list. Um, like I wouldn't let Joey do that.
Yeah, he told me. He told me don't give my number to Joey. Yeah,
He makes me use the
Joey,
WhatsApp. He makes me use
I was gonna say,
WhatsApp with him.
you probably have the Google number, right? That forwards to a voicemail.
Oh man, this is awesome. I'm so glad you guys were willing to do it.
Thanks for
It's
having
been
us.
awesome. Yeah, man.
Thanks for tuning in to Mental Health and the Mission of the Church. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on future conversations. And if you found value in what you heard, we'd love for you to share it with a friend or on social media. It really helps us grow and reach more people just like you. So until next time, let's continue building better partnerships between the mental health community and the mission of the church. We'll catch you in the next episode, everybody.